if you were to ask me what should this cost, I don't have an answer for you. 6th level definitely seems too high. I think this is, again, really close to a feature. It's something you do over a long rest. So it doesn't really matter what spell slot level it is. It
Yeah.
being available at 11th level doesn't change its power at all. Its cost doesn't really change its power at all. It's just an extra little familiar. And I don't think it needs to exist.
Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're talking about the spell Create Homunculus.
What? It's a homunculus.
Well
Hello.
done.
Thank you. I'm a magician. This is a 6th level spell from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Cast times an hour. Range is touch. It requires various magic components. It requires clay, ash, and mandrake root, all of which the spell consumes, and a jewel-encrusted dagger with at least a grand. While speaking an intricate incantation, you cut yourself with a jewel-encrusted dagger, taking 2d4 piercing damage that can't be reduced in any way. You then drip your blood on the spell's other components and touch them, transforming them into a special construct called a homunculus. Statistics of the homunculus are in the monster manual. It is your faithful companion, and if it dies, it dies if you die.
Right,
Whenever you finish a long rest, you can spend up to half your hit dice if the homunculus is on the same plane of existence as you. When you do, roll each die and add your constitution modifier to it. Your hit point max is reduced by the total, and the homunculus hit point max and current hit points are both increased by it. This process can reduce you to no lower than 1 hit point, and the change to you and your homunculus's hit points end when you finish your next long rest. The reduction to HP can't be removed by any means before then, except in the case of the homunculus's death. You can only have one homunculus at a time. If you cast a spell, your homunculus lives, the spell fails. That's a whole lot of extra words for what is functionally a second familiar. So
yes. Yeah, that bothers me about this spell. As does well, it's only for wizards. They already have a familiar that they got at level 1.
This definitely.
The other find multiple familiars. What's that spell called?
Block of familiars. At least that has concentration, and you can't get a million of them. This really is more like a feature where you just cast this once and then you ignore all the text about giving it hit points or some crap, because you never ever want to do that, I don't think. Because you don't consume the dagger, right?
Right.
Yeah. So you just need to find have some spare clay, ash, and mandrake root and be willing to take 2d4 piercing damage before you long rest. That damage isn't permanent. I thought whenever I first read this that you would reduce your max HP by 2d4. No, there's no actual costs. You could regain that hit points back by sneezing in this edition. So this is more or less just going to give you an extra little buddy that has a 40-foot fly speed. It is functionally a familiar. So neat.
It doesn't do all the familiar things, like you can't cast spells through it or see through its eyes or anything like that, right?
Correct. It does have, so there are some notable abilities on it that we can touch on real quick. So 40-foot fly speed, as I mentioned before, is something that it comes with. It's immune to the charm to poison condition. It has dark vision up to 60 feet. It has an ability called telepathic bond. So while it's on the same plane of existence as you, it can magically convey what it senses to you, and you can communicate telepathically, which is very close, if not a little bit better than an average familiar's telepathic abilities. And it also has a bite attack that makes a DC 10 con save to poison stuff. It's pretty bad. DC 10 con save is never really want to be. So you're going to use it mainly for the telepathic bond stuff, which is what you normally use a familiar for, right?
Right. So what is the advantage to this?
It's a second one. And it's very low cost, right? You cast the spell once in a while, you invest in a dagger, and you take a 6th level spell in your spellbook. You prepare it in between adventures, then you have this buddy for the rest of time until it dies, and you go, okay, well, I'll have to prepare it some other time and make it come back. And then you got 2 familiars. That's it's not that hard to do, and the upside is fine.
Yeah.
There's zero reason to ever give this thing your hit points, right? It's just always wrong to do that.
I would think so.
Yeah, I don't think giving a monster that has a DC 10 poison save as its only combat action and an AC of 13, giving it your hit points is not where you want to be. I don't think.
No,
you want
not
your
at
hit
the
points.
level of play where you're casting 6th level spells.
Yeah, by 11th level, you're like, oh no, I want this for its utility. I don't know why I would ever consider using this thing in combat, because that's not what it is for.
Yes. I guess a second familiar is cool, but I don't need it.
I honestly think that's where this usually lands, right? It's like, this is kind of ghoulish overkill, but it also doesn't cost a lot. So,
I would have liked this on a different class that doesn't get Find Familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, all right, well, I can have a familiar, but I have to wait until I can cast 6-level spells. Then I can kind of see it. But even those classes, I mean, with the Magic Initiate feat and whatever, everybody can get Find Familiar.
I think it's a little bit funny to consider, right? Find Familiar is so good that they printed it at 6th level a second time, right? Like, that's kind of what this reads as.
Yeah.
And like, to your point, the Artificer class, Artificer Infusions, one of them makes a homunculus. It makes a little robot buddy that flies around with you, or a little clay buddy, a little construct. That's literally what it does, and it's an infusion. I think it's a perfect home for it. I don't think they needed to print this. Like,
Yeah.
I don't normally want a second familiar. Like, the first familiar is doing 80% plus of the work of 2. Like, they're gonna do the one job, and that is to be a little scouting servant that can take some take some actions for you to deliver potions, or, you know, scout out into the dark, sneak around as a rat or whatever. This will do that. It'll just be on average usually a little bit worse than a familiar, because you can't like dismiss it and resummon it instantaneously. Like, this one has to still fly around and do all the stuff. Now, this is, maybe you make one of these and leave it somewhere. Maybe this is like a narrative device where you use this to, like, you have the familiar around some other people, you telepathically communicate with it in some other city, and it just like scrawls out what you're saying, and you use it as a telephone to a different, you know, person or NPC or whatever. But that's definitely like big grand scope stakes kind of campaigns, and in that instance there's other ways to do this too, right?
Yeah, I'm not excited about that.
It's like ascending, and that's whatever.
Yeah, I feel like this is, I'm seeing net negative all around. Look, but this is going to make your first familiar feel less special. I already, you know, I've talked about this before. I already don't like that they've taken all the stakes out of having a familiar. There's no, you're not afraid of losing it or anything, or, but it's still, at least it's your special little buddy. It's part of your character's charm or persona or whatever. I've got this little rat on my shoulder all the time. Now I've got a little rat and whatever the hell this thing looks like. Takes that away from the artificer then. You know, look, all right, an artificer has, you can make this little homunculus. It's a familiar like creature. And yeah, that's something they can do. Now, that's not as special anymore.
Yeah. I definitely agree with basically everything, right? I think this is, for the players that want all the pets, this is an extra little pet. And that's something that's fine, right? If you want all the little pets, you probably want to be a wizard anyway, because they get all of the summoning stuff you could ask for. They get, like, even compared to druid, you're like, I can use Find Familiar, you could use Find Familiar, but mine is forever. I get Summon Shadow Spawn, I get Conjure Woodland Beings, I get all the good stuff, minus like Conjure Animals. You're gonna be able to get a billion little critters if you want them. You got all the undead, of course. Obviously, they're less little critters, but you could still, you know, consider them pets if you were to be so inclined.
Yeah.
And now there's one extra. Is it that much better? Not really. Like, if you were to ask me what should this cost, I don't have an answer for you. 6th level definitely seems too high. I think this is, again, really close to a feature. It's something you do over a long rest. So it doesn't really matter what spell slot level it is. It being available at 11th level doesn't change its power at all. Its cost doesn't really change its power at all. It's just an extra little familiar. And I don't think it needs to exist. So, like, I would have loved to see this kind of effect be another 1st level spell, and it says you can, if you have a familiar, you can't also have a homunculus, right? Make it pick. Maybe you give a construct one that has a little bit of different elements to it. Maybe for like the animators out there, maybe you're not playing at a table that has the book with Artificer in it, so this is a way you can kind of live the engineering kind of math wizard fantasy. You know, you're animating constructs and moderns or whatever, you got a homunculus. They didn't go that though. They just stable to do a 6th level spell, feels arbitrary, stable to 1,000 gold cost to it, which feels arbitrary, and then you get this thing with a bunch of bonus text that you should actively never use because it just kills you for no particularly good reason.
Yes.
Because again, the familiar dying is not there's no cost to that. Like, if the familiar, if the homunculus dying caused like brain damage, I'd be like, yeah, pad out its hit points. You don't want it to randomly go down to a stiff freeze. But if it dies, you just go, okay, I'll just get it back next long rest.
Right.
So, yeah. We should have a video on the impermanence of pets and why we should make pets a little bit riskier, because I think it's a fun conversation. But as is, I'm gonna give this. I mean, like technically, this is fine. I'm gonna give it a 2. It does something, and that thing is permanent. But like,
Yeah, but it's
by
something
this
we've
stage,
already
it's
done since level 1.
yeah, it's ghoulish overkill here, right? You just don't need to waste your time with this. It's not that much better than one familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, 2. It meets our requirements for a 2 technically. So that's what it is. I'm not giving any more than that. But yeah, that was Create Homunculus. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for watching. Let us know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section below. Like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.